Hey guys, it's me, Sarin, back with another video. This video is going to be about gentrification. Gentrification has been a really hot topic recently because it has been really rapidly occurring in most major cities throughout the U.S. Chicago, my hometown of Washington, D.C., is being very rapidly gentrified after, decades of being a majority black city. Brooklyn is really the hub of gentrification. People are calling it the face of gentrification. And also now, Detroit. What inspired me to make this video was an article that I saw on the New York Times website, which of course you guys know I will link, that is basically about how white people especially, but artists are leaving Brooklyn and are moving to Detroit. And the entire article is kind of narrated and framed around the fleeing of this white guy named Elms that lived in Brooklyn for like 20 years. He did art out of Brooklyn, and basically he recently left Brooklyn for Detroit because Brooklyn became hyper gentrified like London. Those were his exact words. He said, I'm an artist, I want to create, I want to nurture other artists, and they just can't live in Brooklyn anymore. It's too expensive, and, coming to New York City and Brooklyn in particular, is destroying people's careers because they just can't afford it. So basically the article focuses on how Detroit is pretty much at this point a blank canvas. I'm sure we've all seen the disaster porn images and stories about how Detroit is like this vast, sprawling urban wasteland, and how Detroit is the land that time fucking forgot, and how the government, abandoned Detroit, and the water crisis and the violence, and how, the police basically said, we can't do shit with this city no more. Niggas gonna have to police themselves like the Wild Wild West. Basically, Detroit was an abandoned city. Detroit is a city with a between 85 and 90% black population. They were formerly, the motor city. They were the motor capital where all the, automotive production happened before most of it became automated, done by robots, and also, moved out of the country, moved overseas. They also at one point had Motown. They had a really rocking, black music scene, and then that kind of fell off. And basically, I always felt like Detroit was abandoned because it is a majority black city. They basically said, nothing but niggas live here anyway. We don't really give a fuck about this city. We don't give a fuck, bitch. We don't give a fuck about you or anything that you do, which is even more ironic because Big Sean is from Detroit, the D. So they basically abandoned the city. But something really interesting started happening in Detroit after it was abandoned, and that is that the people that lived there, huge swaths of the city left. There was a mass exodus out of Detroit. I believe the city is about a third of the size of what it used to be. The city has shrunk exponentially, and they have a lot of urban prairie, which is basically where there, were houses where it was urban area. Now nature has kind of like reclaimed those areas, lots of empty houses or houses that have been knocked down, and now you have all this like sprawling green area. And what a lot of people that live there have started doing is kind of remaking Detroit. So Detroit has this huge up-and-coming art scene, and they also have a really huge economy for small businesses. They have one of the largest black-owned small business populations in the country. I read a really good article recently about how, black-owned businesses are quietly bringing Detroit's economy back to life, but nobody is talking about it because we just all love some disaster porn, right? We love seeing Detroit looking like a fucking bomb went off. We don't see that they have, a bustling downtown area with lots of small businesses and art shops and things like that that are mostly being ran by black people. Now, something interesting has started to happen as Detroit's economy has kind of hummed back to life, and that's that you have these white people that are starting to take notice, especially artists and people that, they feel like, they're vibrant, creative people. They need to live in a vibrant, creative area, and they find that places like Brooklyn, Fort Greene and stuff like that are becoming too sanitized and gentrified. They're looking at Detroit as, the Wild Wild West, the unexplored, frontier. The title of this New York Times article by this guy Elms was like, I moved to Detroit from Brooklyn because Brooklyn totally lost its sense of adventure. It became sanitized, it became gentrified, and I was done with it. And now, I'm going to start over fresh in Detroit. And he goes on to explain, how, as I'm sure we all know, everything in Detroit is super cheap. The land is super cheap right now. The houses are super cheap right now. This guy goes on to explain how he bought 9 buildings to utilize for art space that cost less than his one apartment in New York. And then they have tons of other stories from other people that are doing, white people, artists especially, and small business owners that are doing the same thing. They're going to Detroit. They're taking advantage of the low property value right now. And they're, creating businesses, they're creating these art spaces. It says the article says Detroit right now is a blank canvas. It can be anything that we want it to be. Think about that. There's a whole city of people that are still there, that have always been there, and that have never left. An 85 to 90% Black population that has been keeping this city afloat for the last 5 to 7 years that the city has been abandoned. And yet, what these white creatives and these white hipsters and these well-to-do white people see is they see a blank canvas. They completely, disavow the people that are there, and that is the backbone of gentrification. And gentrification is basically modern day colonization. It is modern day colonization. You're not allowed to go into an inhabited country anymore and fucking kill all the people there and kick their asses out or shuttle them onto reservations or kill them with disease. You're not allowed to do that anymore, right? You're not allowed to do that anymore. But what happened with colonization was that it kind of morphed into this new thing, gentrification, where the principles are the same. You take a place like Brooklyn, like Detroit, that already has people that live there, that already has a rich, culture and a spirit. The people that live in Detroit are very much like, they're tough, they're scrappy. They're like, you know what, this is our city. We're not going to abandon our city. We're going to make this thing work. And now you have people that are like, I see what you guys are doing there. You guys are doing something there. And I've been really intrigued by Detroit and what's been going on there for the last few months. And it's so funny because I've been telling my husband, Detroit is going to come back. Detroit is going to come back. I was like, especially with these property values so low, I was like, white people are going to move out there. They're going to buy everything up. They're going to gentrify the fuck out of that city. And Detroit is going to come back. And that is really exactly what's happening now. Because that is how white people work, okay? Colonialism, gentrification, it's parasitism. White people are parasites. I'm going to read you guys a definition of parasites. Parasitism. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Parasitism, whatever. It is a non-mutual, that is key, non-mutual, symbiotic relationship between species where one species, the parasite, benefits at the expense of the other, the host. You know what else that kind of sounds like? Slavery. When a whole group of people benefited off of another entire group of people. When a whole group of white people sat on their asses and didn't do shit but benefit off of an entire other group of people doing all their fucking work for them. White people are parasites. They're parasites. Colonialism is a form of parasitism. Excuse me if I am mispronouncing that. And gentrification is also another form of colonialism, of parasitism, of violence. This is violence. White people enact violence against the people that are native to an area. They come in, they kick everyone out, they raise the property value, they push everyone out, and then they basically consume everything and then they move on. They are parasites. Look at this story with this man talking about Brooklyn versus Detroit. He is waxing poetic about, the adventures of Detroit and the grittiness, and it's so raw and real. You know how white people are with that type of shit. And talking about how Brooklyn has become, hyper gentrified and hyper sanitized and just doesn't have that same old feeling. And there is absolutely no awareness of the fact that people like you, this man, this white man, are what caused that gentrification in Brooklyn. There is absolutely no awareness of that fact. And now you're gonna, you've consumed everything in Brooklyn. You've consumed the culture. You've consumed the resources. You've driven everyone away that made Brooklyn what it was, and you turned it into some white, sanitized bullshit like y'all do with everything. Now that you've wrung every last drop out of the borough, you don't want it anymore, and you're gonna move on, and you're gonna do the same exact thing somewhere else. And they're completely unironic when they say these things. They live completely outside of reality, And I made some Tumblr posts about it that I have in front of me that I'm going to read you guys. The initial post that led me to the New York Times article. Brooklyn lost its whole sense of adventure for me on leaving the borough for Detroit. One of the first comments, how many black people will be priced and gentrified out of their neighborhoods because white assholes like this are seeking adventure? Are you fucking kidding me? Shaking my head. My city is not an experiment. My city is not where you come to find adventure. Get the fuck out of here. And I said, black people, if you have money, please buy land in Detroit. We are about to be priced out of a city that was abandoned by the government because it was 90% black. Black people have been rebuilding that city through small business, and now the white people are preparing to come back. It's just like that episode of Hey Arnold, the Vacant Lot. I feel like I've talked about this Hey Arnold episode in other videos, but it's a really, really, really great, clear, concise metaphor, for kind of gentrification and colonialism and the way that all this stuff works. Arnold and his friends, they see a lot. The lot is full of garbage, right? They're city kids. They're inner city kids. They play baseball on the street. They're trying to find somewhere to play baseball. They say, hey, maybe we can clean up the vacant lot and we can play baseball there. So they spend all week cleaning it out, mowing the grass, throwing everything in the garbage. They go, they get the dust. They make a baseball diamond. They get one good day of play out of it. They named it Gerald Field. And after they leave, the grown-ups come and they look and they see how nice the lot looks cleaned up. Now, they didn't notice the lot when it was all fucked up, right? But now that it's cleaned up and now that they're doing something with it, the grown-ups say, hey, that's a nice lot. I could use that for something. And when the kids come back the next day, the grown-ups are raising tomatoes and they got chickens and they're playing checkers. And the kids try to play baseball and the grown-ups scream at them and they say, this is no place for a baseball field. And at the end, Arnold being Arnold, he says, we cleaned this place up. We made it into Gerald Field. We did all of this, and then you came in and you claimed it and you kicked us out. That is colonialism. That is gentrification in a nutshell. These people come into these spaces with absolutely no regard for the people that already live there. They say, this is mine now. They take it over. They suck everything out of it, and then they move on. They're parasites. They're parasites. White people are parasites that live off of other people and that live off of other cultures. That's just what they do, And I put another post on Tumblr that was about parasites and parasitism. I really hope I'm not mispronouncing that. Where I put, Brooklyn lost its sense of adventure because white people destroyed it with gentrification. That is what they do. They consume entire cultures, destroy cities, and then move on. They are parasites, and gentrification is violence. And then people replied, they washed over Brooklyn like a plague. Now they're trying to invade Queens and the South Bronx. I hate what the transplants did to my city. It's funny because these white people come to these cities because they are trendy, exciting, and real, but then they price out all the people and strip away all the culture that made those areas interesting. They consume everything they touch. And someone else put, they're basically the Borg. The Borg are an alien race on Star Trek that they're like some of the main antagonists. And basically they do the same thing, right? They take over planets, they suck them dry, they use assimilation to force other species into the collective, and then they fucking move on, right? And the Borg catchline is, resistance is futile. And this is basically the same thing with white people. They invade spaces. That is what they do. Be it an internet space, a comment section, be it a city, be it a town, be it a country. Back in the good old days of colonization, they invade spaces and they consume everything until the last drop is gone, and then they say, I'm bored of this. And they move on, and they completely unironically do not give a second thought to the fact that they are destroying communities, they are destroying lives, they're destroying everything. That is what they do. Gentrification is violence, it's colonialism, it's destruction, and white people are parasites. They really are. And it's hard to talk about because it's like, what can you do? What can you do? You know, what can you do to fight back? Resistance is really futile as long as, you know, we have these systems in place, the system of racism, white supremacy that, you know, that is so self-sustaining that they're able to do this and, you know, continually get away with it and, you know, push us out and price us out. The same thing was happening in Washington Heights when I was living in Washington Heights, you know. I remember seeing this white guy with these two big-ass dogs all of a sudden in my neighborhood walking his dogs. Me and some of the neighbors were like, oh, there goes the neighborhood, because white people are like fucking roaches. As soon as you see one, you know the rest are gonna come, and the next thing you know, the fucking landlord is gonna want to start renovating the building. He's gonna want to raise the rent up. All of the rest of us are gonna have to move. Before I lived in Washington Heights, I lived in Harlem, and that exact thing happened. I lived in my apartment in Harlem for 3 years. All of a sudden, one year, the landlord decided he wanted to renovate the building, and he was gonna raise the rent. What happened the year before that? White people moved in across the street. And then they ended up building some new condominiums. And the next thing you know, the bodegas are getting priced out because they've opened up a fucking Trader Joe's and they've opened up a this and they've opened up a that. But none of those things, those chains and all that shit, none of those things have any type of culture. They're sanitary. They're gentrified, and they destroy communities. And it's violent. It is a violent plague. Just like I always say. White people are a plague. They're parasites. They consume everything until there's nothing left, and they just destroy. They're just on a path of destruction. They destroyed the whole world. They fucking left out from Europe with their fucking diseases, and they fucking spread across the world, colonizing everywhere, introducing ideas of colorism, introducing caste systems based on color, introducing all these concepts of light skin versus dark skin versus this versus that, whiteness is right, whiteness is the ideal, you know, the ideal beauty standard, introducing all these ideas about religion and all concepts that we didn't have, that people of color did not have. They literally spread across the entire world like a virus, touching everywhere with fucking, you know, physical disease, smallpox and malaria and syphilis, as well as mental disease and diseases that we're still dealing with to this day in 2015. They are the Borg, for real, right? And it's just really fucking upsetting. And, you know, we have to really start talking about ways to take our power back, you know? Buying land, buying homes, buying property, not selling out just because some white people come and say, here, I'll give you $1 million for this fucking house. You know, we really have to start, you know, collectively saying we have had enough. We have had enough of this parasitic behavior. We have had enough of this colonization. We have had enough of this violence. We have had enough of this gentrification. No more. And you guys are not the standard for what a neighborhood should be, what a city should be. We're done with it. We're done. We're done. We're done entertaining you, you fucking Borg, asshole, parasite, alien, filthy trash, scum of the universe. It's done. You know, gentrification is violence. Gentrification is violence. And, you know, to all you coons that think, oh, white people coming into your neighborhood is a good thing and it's going to drive the value up and this and that, fuck you too, because you're part of the problem. So that was it. I just wanted to talk a bit about gentrification. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Of course, I'll include tons of links as always. Food for thought as always. See you guys next time. Peace.